Today we're going to look at all the things you'll need to know before you play your first game of Dungeons & Dragons as a player. The good news is, it's probably a lot less than you think. You'll be playing with a Dungeon Master and in all likelihood several other players, so you don't need to have all the rules memorised in advance, as the people you're playing with will help you. What we'll be covering here in this video is what you'll need to know before the game starts, and how the game works in very broad terms. There are lots of different ways to play Dungeons & Dragons. Some games are very serious games, full of deadly traps and constant peril, set in harsh worlds, and others are full of humour, where your character dying is unlikely, and set in a typical fantasy forest full of fairies and elves. It's important to understand the tone of the game you'll be joining, so that you can make the right kind of character. Right at the start, your Dungeon Master, or DM, should tell you some basic information about the game, including the setting, tone, and any other expectations that they might have for the game they'll be running. When we're talking about setting, we're thinking about the world that the characters live in. Is it hot? Is it cold? Is food plentiful or scarce? And so on. If your DM says the words standard fantasy setting, then that basically means like in Lord of the Rings. When we're talking about tone, we're thinking about how the characters in that world approach situations, and, to a lesser extent, you as a player. For example, if your DM is running a serious game, then a character that is constantly cracking jokes and trying to seduce people probably won't be appropriate. If it's a more light-hearted game, then a character that is constantly talking about how their parents were murdered in an alley behind a theatre, and that's why they now wear a cape to fight crime, might not fit the bill either. If you're not sure about either of these things, then ask your DM and they can give you some guidance. Also, remember that the DM is on your side. They want you and everyone else at the table to have a good time. So if they tell you that you might want to change an aspect of your character, then at least consider it. Before you get to play in a game, you'll need a character. Take the information the DM has already given you about the world and use that to come up with an idea for a character that could live in that world. If you're not sure what kind of character you want to create, then think of some characters from books or movies that you like. Chances are you'll be able to use them as a basic framework for your character and then change them a bit to make them your own. This is probably the easiest way to make your first character if you're really not sure what to do. On the other hand, you can also make whatever kind of character you want. Do you want to be a plant person who fights using pots and pans instead of swords? Fine. Do you want to be a half-dragon mage who casts all their spells by making armpit farting noises? No problem. Do you just want to be a person that hits things with a sword like you would in the real world? That's okay too. It's generally easier to come up with an idea for who a character is and then get the numbers and game mechanics to fit that idea than to create a generic character with a sword and try and build a personality on top of that. You also don't need to know everything about your character and their history. Parts of it you can think of in advance, but parts of it you make up as you go. What you really need is a good sense of who they are and what motivates them. Try imagining them in a situation and think how they would act if they were there. I've made a separate video that goes into character creation in more depth, so check that out if you need more help. At its most basic level, D&D is really simple. The DM sets the scene and tells you about the world around you, and you tell them how you want your character to react to that world. For example, they say that you're in a tavern and people are dancing. You might say that your character wants to dance too, or to go and get a drink, or to pick a few pockets while people are distracted. The DM will then tell you if you need to roll any dice and how your actions play out. And that's basically it. There are more rules and dice to roll, but if you go to your first game with only that in mind, you'll be okay. If you've got a character sheet in front of you already, you'll probably have noticed that it has a bunch of numbers across it, and it all seems quite overwhelming. The good news is that it can all be broken down quite simply, and honestly, for the most part you don't need to worry about it. If you've ever played Skyrim or another RPG, then the stats at the left side of the page should look pretty familiar. Strength, dexterity, constitution, wisdom, intelligence and charisma. But the main thing you need to know is that these numbers go towards telling you what your character is good at and what they aren't. High numbers good, low numbers bad. Being bad at something isn't a bad thing. It can be very funny when you're playing as a stupid barbarian, for example. Similarly, just because you have low numbers doesn't mean you will always fail. There's always a chance you'll roll high on a dice even if your stats are low. Basically, don't worry about it too much. The main numbers you really need to know about are your skills, your saves, your attacks, your health points, and your armour class. Let's have a quick look at each of these. There are 3 times you'll need to be rolling dice in D&D, and for all of them you'll be using the same dice, the D20 or 20-sided dice. This will be when you're doing something, attacking something, or something is being done to you. The DM will always ask you to roll the dice, so you don't need to worry about when to do this, just wait for them to ask you. The first type of roll is when you want to do something, and when that happens you'll be asked to make a skill check. If you want to try and search a room for something or sneak past a guard, then your DM will ask you to make a certain type of check. You'll look for it in this list of skills, roll a d20 and add the number next to the skill. If you roll a 10 and have a +1, then that gives you a total of 11. The second type of roll is when you want to attack something. You choose the weapon you're attacking with, roll a d20 and add the to hit modifier. This tells you whether you hit whatever it is you're attacking. If you do, then you roll damage using the dice in the damage box. The third type of roll is called a saving throw, and it's what you do when things are happening to you. If rocks are falling or an evil wizard is casting a spell at you, then you'll be asked to make a saving throw. Once you've told the DM what you've rolled, they will tell you the outcome of the situation. The last 2 things to be aware of are your health points and your armour class. Your armour class represents how hard to hit you are, and is what your enemies are trying to beat when they're hitting you with their weapons and spells. If they roll the same as your armour class or higher, then they hit you. If they roll lower, then they miss. If you get hit or take damage in another way, then this takes away some of your health points, which show how much fight you have left in you. If you reach 0 health points, then your character falls unconscious until your friends can help you back up. And that's basically it, D&D in a nutshell. Understand your character, at least a little bit. Know where the skill checks, saving throws, attack rolls, armor class and hit points are on your character sheet, and just relax and have fun. There are some final rules that are worth mentioning, but are pretty basic. Number 1, show respect to the people you're playing with. The DM has taken a lot of time to run this game for you, and the players have all made their characters, so just try and play nice with everyone. Number 2, if something your character is doing, or is going to do, will upset someone, don't do it. Some players have this idea that their character doing insert horrible thing here is okay, even though it would upset someone else that they're playing with. Do not upset the people you're playing with. It is a game. Show respect for your fellow players and their boundaries. If you upset someone by mistake, apologise like a grown-up and don't do it again. Number 3. If the DM tells you something, listen to them. The DM is there to give you a fun experience, tell you information about the world, and sometimes guide you if you're not sure what you're doing. If they've told you that something you're trying to do won't work, don't argue. They're on your side, so just be respectful. Basically, show basic common courtesy and respect. And that's pretty much all you need to know in order to play your first game of Dungeons & Dragons as a player. Go roll some dice and have a great time.